welcome back to this week's episode of AMA Friday with Amy Miller, recruiting and yoga fans. A big topic to discuss today. We are going to dig into the difference between applicants and candidates. You probably think there isn't a difference. And in some cases, you would be right. Here's the thing. The reason why I care about this and the reason why I put this poll on LinkedIn and Twitter, and the poll was, which one you'd want to talk about, right? It was candidates versus applicants or OFCCP compliance. Candidates versus applicants obviously won. We're going to tackle OFCCP next week, so more to come there. But the idea behind applicants versus candidates, it kind of goes back to even why I bitch all the time about like ATS robots and all that stupid shit, because what we call something matters, right? Like the word choice matters, the verbiage that we use matters. And this is one of those cases where for a lot of companies, not all companies by any means, but a lot of companies, particularly those bound by OFCCP compliance, the term applicant, or better yet, internet applicant, as defined by OFCCP, has a certain workflow and a certain set of expectations that we are required to follow. Okay, so I wanted to kind of dig into those different terms, how they're used, how they should be used. Because let's face it, not all of us are that good at this all the time. Okay, I'm talking about my industry here. There's some mediocre recruiters out there. But I really think it's important to talk about, and I hope for any recruiters watching, if you have some insight here or you disagree with me or want to add something, drop a comment. Like, my friends out in Viewerland read the comments. I am pretty sure. I know I certainly do. So I think this is an important one for us to just understand. And again, it's all part of that overall goal of busting recruiting myths and helping job seekers understand how all this stuff works, how to know where you sit in relation to certain processes, what you can control, what you can do to move things forward or understand how things work. That's the plan. So we're going to talk about that this week. Got the handy dandy whiteboard. Y'all know it's serious when I bust out the whiteboard. That will forever be my favorite thing. So thank you for that. All right. So I actually look at my candidate pool. So that big giant group of people that I'm trying to talk to, I look at it in three different ways. Okay. Number one, I have my prospects. For me, a prospect is someone that I want to talk to. A prospect is someone where I have, maybe I've reached out to you. Maybe I've sent you an email. Maybe I've been following you on Twitter. I mean, there's no, basically the net of what a prospect is there's been one-way communication, right? Or you're just on a pipeline list, like and I'll give you an example. I'm looking for, or I will be looking for, a very specific kind of hardware engineer. It is very specific to the product that the thing my company is building. And I mean, it's a narrow little area of expertise. And we're not ready to hire this person yet, but we know it's coming. So I'm collecting names and I'm saving LinkedIn profiles and I'm following people on Twitter and I'm putting people into like my CRM and my list of people that I want to reach out to in the near future. And those are my prospects. They probably don't even know it, okay? But based on the information that I have, there's a bunch of people that I think might be interesting for this upcoming role that's not open yet. And I want to kind of have a list of prospects where I either have like a list of people that I want to get to know, or I may have already started reaching out to people, or maybe even for roles I currently have, I'm reaching out to people and I only have one-way communication. So they've not responded to me. They're not applying. They're not interested yet. it's just me going after them, that's something that I would call a prospect. That would be a person that I would consider to be a prospect. They're not a candidate, and they're definitely not an applicant. Okay, so that's number one. The second kind of person in a recruiter's world is going to be a candidate. Okay, so a candidate is kind of a general, almost a catch-all for all of the people that we talk to. I personally feel like a candidate is only a candidate when we have established some two-way communication. All right, they've responded to my email. They've said, yeah, I'll entertain a conversation with you. Sure, I could be convinced to change jobs, for the right opportunity. There's been something that has indicated that there's something to work towards. There's two-way communication, there's potential interest, those kinds of things. A candidate also there's been a connection with somebody who's hiring. Okay, so I also look at a candidate as maybe there's somebody who's been referred. Maybe there's somebody who has agreed, like, okay, I don't know how seriously I might be looking, but I'll get on a call with your engineering leader. Like, I'll do a cell call. I'll do a quick, introductory call. So if we're at that stage in this kind of profile life cycle, if you will, where there's two-way communication or where there's a connection happening with the hiring manager, that's somebody I would consider a candidate. Okay? Prospect, they don't even know I exist maybe, or they're just not interested in me or not taking my call. A candidate, we've now established, like, maybe there's something here. Maybe there's something we can talk about, plans we can make for the future, that kind of thing. That's going to be a candidate. An applicant, this is where it gets tricky. A candidate is not necessarily an applicant. Okay, and we're going to talk about why. But a candidate is not necessarily an applicant. But an applicant is always a candidate. I know, it's confusing, right? Here's what I mean by that. An applicant is tied to a role. Okay, this is the important distinction. They have, maybe they've applied, maybe they have been referred, like, formally through the system, and they are tagged to or tied to a specific position. They are now an applicant for that position. So a candidate can be in consideration for a number of roles. We can be talking about a specific position. We can be planning, moving towards applicant status, but they're not necessarily an applicant until they have proactively made that decision to apply to a position. I will tell you, I have worked with people, with job seekers who started out as a prospect. Hey, you don't know me. I have some cool stuff going on. I want to talk to you. They've then decided to respond to me. So we've engaged at the candidate level, and maybe we have some back and forth. I'm doing my recruiter phone screen, those kinds of things. And now we've decided, you know what, there's an actual specific position that I want to interview for. I want to formally enter into the applicant process. That's where you become an applicant. Okay, the applicant is often, as I mentioned with OFCCP, again, not every company is going to be bound by this, but enough of them are that it's an important conversation we're going to dig into next week. But that then forces me to put my applicants through a very specific process. That's a resume review against basic qualifications. So those pesky BQs become important again. That is a review process, whether that's a hiring manager looked at the resume, we set up a technical phone screen, whatever that is. The applicant is going to go through a specific process. If the applicant is then hired against the rec, awesome, you're now an employee. If they're not, and if we have dispositioned the person from a specific rec, they can go back into candidate pool, or they can go back up to prospect for your future role. Okay, so again, if we're going back to a prospect, maybe some time has passed. It's been a couple years since we last touched base. Now I've got new stuff going on. I'm ready to re-engage you. You respond to me. We have a two-way communication. We start the cycle over again, right? An applicant can also go back into the general candidate pool if we decide, hey, not this role, we're going to disposition you from this particular position, but you are absolutely still somebody we like, somebody we want to talk to in the future, somebody we want to talk to next week. Maybe I've got a new role coming up that's perfect for you. So you're back to being a candidate. The applicant status, this is so important, you guys. The applicant status is tied to you being tied to a specific requisition, right? A specific job posting or opening. So that's the big difference. I think one of the things that makes this so confusing is people don't necessarily follow the workflow. You can become an applicant without ever having talked to someone. You don't have to be a prospect and a candidate. You can insert yourself into the applicant pool by applying to a job. Okay, the key here, and this is the part that I need y'all to get, if you are applying to a role, you may be, in many circumstances, bound by certain criteria, bound by those basic qualifications, bound by being a fit for the job, whether it's a formal OFCCP compliance or just a general, like, the manager knows what they want and you're either it or not it. That's how we look at applicants. Candidates and prospects, we're generally looking a little bit more broadly and we're saying, where does this person fit in the bigger org? Would this person consider a role with us? Then we get into the specifics of the role with us, okay? See the difference? It's subtle, but it's there. So that, my friends, is how we break down the pipeline or the job seeker life cycle of recruiting. So you can pop in and out of any of these categories at any time. But you know what's really interesting? All of them, in some form or fashion, forever and ever, are in the ATS. No robots. We'll see you next week.